Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, we talk to the CEO and General Manager of People's Leasing and Finance, DP Kumarage, about Sri Lanka's leasing and finance sector. The Business Confidence Index is down by a fraction. Nielsen's Managing Director Shahin Kader looks at the reasons for waning biz sentiment. And wrapping up the show, Deshal Dimel, economist and LMD columnist, gives us his unique perspective on Sri Lanka's macro outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Hello and welcome to Benchmark. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. In the spotlight today is the leasing and finance sector, and we're going to determine how post-war development has impacted this sector, the challenges it's facing, including the ad hoc tax revisions and the import duties that have been imposed on vehicles when they are imported. To shed more light and to give us his expert opinion, we are delighted to welcome to our studios once again Mr. DP Kumarage, the CEO and General Manager of People's Leasing and Finance. So welcome once again, Mr. Kumarage. Just as a background, could you just give me an idea of how the leasing and finance sector is actually doing these days?
Well, Savitri, if you take the couple of years back, the industry was doing very well. There was substantial growth. There were a lot of infrastructure projects that was taking place, mainly with regard to road network. And now we see most of those road network infrastructure development projects are in tapering, but some other development projects are to be started. So in that sense, we see a small lull in the period, but we are very confident that this will pick up with the commencement of the other development projects that are proposed to come.
So if the road development network is tapering, by that I mean I guess you mean that everything is now more or less complete. That means that should give you a little opportunity in the transportation sector.
You are very correct, Savitri, because now we see most of the, especially with regard to the two highways that they have opened, there are new bus services, especially the AC buses. There is a substantial demand for. That's a new product that has already developed, and at the same time, we find the other routes are not being taken much because most of the people travel in the highways now. To that extent, there's a small drop in those roads with regard to transport.
Now, just to move a little away, how have the ad hoc tax revisions and the import duties on vehicles over the recent years, they've been, as and when it happens, how has the leasing and finance industry actually managed to cope with that?
Yes, Savitri, now in any case, ad hoc changes to any sector is not good. There should be some consistency. But where the tax changes are concerned, these ad hoc changes took place with regard to cars, not to commercial vehicles. Most of the leasing companies are dealing with commercial vehicles. The cars were dealt by the banks. Where the cars were concerned, there was a little bit of uncertainty because of the wavering of the tax. The cars didn't move for some time because if you analyze, the government brought down the taxes to a very low level, and in about another year's time, they brought it to the other extreme end, which was definitely had a small impact with regard to the leasing industry.
What is your view of the collapse of a fair number of financial institutions in the recent past? I think from into 2009, especially a total of 8 NFBIs faced liquidity problems. When you look at the overall sector, there's always been this, up and down kind of thing.
Yeah.
What is your view on all these collapses, and what do you think needs to be done to go beyond that?
Most of these companies, if you analyze, they were very small companies which have started very recently, maybe about within 4 to 5 years. And these are companies that were not following any corporate governance. They were not following basically the regulatory requirements of the central bank. These are the companies that really was more or less falling. And now with this, that is why this consolidation is going to take place.
Now, if you look at infrastructure development activity, we touched on the road network, for instance. Given that there has been this huge spike in post-war development, how has that impacted your industry?
Few of the large companies were doing extremely well, because when you become large, you have access to low-cost funding, then you can diversify your business, you can invest in other development of the company. So, although there are about 58 players, Savitri, only about 6 or 7 players account for almost 75 to 80% of the market. So you can imagine how small the other companies are. So the big players, not that I won't say small companies didn't do well, but the big companies were doing extremely well.
Mr. Kumarage, IT, digitalization is the way the future is progressing, and I think the finance and leasing sector also would be in the sort of the crux of it, and exactly. That is the way it should progress. Sure. So how is Sri Lanka's finance and leasing sector actually doing in terms of digitalization?
Well, Savitri, most of the companies, because of the competition, they have to give a good service to a customer. That's the key. That is the survival of a company. So in order to do that, we have to move to improve the systems, improve our computer aspects of it, invest more in that, and get more and more management information, so that we can give a very good service to the customer, as well as so that we will meet all the regulatory requirement of the central bank, because a lot of new reports are being asked. Unless you move to the digital process, we will find it difficult to meet all those requirements. So larger companies in that sense will have an advantage than the smaller companies, because the investment is fairly heavy in this.
Just before we close for a break, do you agree with the current monetary policy stance in the country? You know, we've had the monetary authority struggling to revive the credit appetite in spite of signalling an end to that tight monetary policy that we saw in December 2012. How do you see the current monetary policy stance in the country?
With regard to finance and banks, finance companies and banks, the consolidation is in process. And we see that as a very good thing. Really speaking, this would have been started about 2 to 3 years back. But we feel with the consolidation, a lot of things will be straightened out, and most of the consolidation will bring in very small number of large financial institutions.
So that's what we are going to talk about after the break, Mr. Kumarage. So, as promised, we'll be back after a short commercial break. On the other side, Mr. D.P. Kumarage, the CEO and General Manager of People's Leasing and Finance, will give us or delve in depth with the financial sector consolidation. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
As soon as my salary goes into my H&B account, my family goes shopping just like a power play. Now with HNB mobile banking, wherever you are in the world, you can check your account balance and do your banking with ease. Wherever I am in the world, HNB is active on my mobile and tab 24 hours a day. HNB mobile banking. Bank anywhere from any mobile.
Welcome back to Benchmark. We're continuing our discussion with the CEO and General Manager of People's Leasing and Finance, DP Kumarage, who is also the Chairman of the Leasing Association. So, Mr. Kumarage, with your experience as Chairman of the Leasing Association and having been at People's Leasing and Finance since its inception, what are the measures that you think should induce financial sector consolidation or make it appropriate for financial sector consolidation? What measures should be induced?
Well, Savitri, first and foremost, the number was very large. Now, as it is, there are 58 financial institutions registered with the central bank for leasing. This is, in addition, there are commercial banks which are vying for leasing now. So this number is too heavy for a small country like ours and a small sector like ours. So this has to come down, which is the main thing that the central bank is proposing to do through the consolidation.
But now some do argue, or critics do say, that the obligatory mergers and acquisitions may not be the most efficient way to do it. And in the long term, efficient financial intermediation to support economic growth and stability comes from prudent monetary and exchange rate policy management and regulatory oversight, instead of doing this obligatory M&As. What do you think?
I don't think it's an obligatory thing. Now central bank has done a lot of studies in this with regard to companies that were coming down, and the 58 finance companies, they have categorized to A and B using two criteria. One is a 20 billion asset base and a 1 billion capital base. So there are only 20 companies that are meeting these two requirements. Other 38 companies are not meeting this requirement. So now what they propose through the consolidation is the 58 companies to come to 38. So the whole purpose of the consolidation is to create an NBFI sector which will have small number of large NBFIs.
Right. And do you think that the anticipated number will ultimately work out?
I feel it will be so, at least not at even a little later. This has to take place.
And you think this is the way to go, this is the way it should be done?
I think yes, because this is the model that they are more or less following what is happening in Malaysia. The central bank, according to them, they have studied what happened in Malaysia, what happened in Singapore and China. And they have taken the Malaysian model and more or less adjusted to the extent that will suit Sri Lanka, and they are trying to implement it in a similar manner.
At the same time, Mr. Kumarage, is the sector prepared to face the regulatory and human resources challenges that could arise with this consolidation process?
Yes, Savitri, one of the biggest drawbacks, problems that the companies will save, a company that is acquiring a small company, one of the major problems will be staffing. And of course, there are other problems as well with regard to the culture of the company. The two cultures may be different, the systems and the procedures may be different. Then the training, levels of training, all that will be different. So the biggest problem that we will face is with regard to staff. And of course, the other thing is most of the companies have a negative net worth. So when a good company, a company in category A takes a company in category B, there might be a tendency where it will dilute the asset base of the acquiring company.
So just finally, what is your vision for the overall vision for the leasing and finance sector?
At the moment, we are contributing only a very small percentage for the GDP, about 3 to 3.5%. With the growth that's happening in the country, which are they expecting a 7% moderate growth, we feel we should be able to contribute at least 5 to 5.5% to the GDP through the leasing sector.
Thank you, Mr. Kumarage. Great talking to you as always.
Thank you, sir.
We've been talking on Benchmark today with Mr. D.P. Kumarage, the CEO and General Manager of People's Leasing and Finance. And on the other side, giving you the latest on the BCI is the Managing Director of Nielsen, Shaheen Khader, and a closer look at the economy with economist and LMD columnist Deshal Dimel.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC. Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC.
As soon as my salary goes into my H&B account, my family goes shopping just like a power play. Now with H&B mobile banking, wherever you are in the world, you can check your account balance and do your banking with ease. Wherever I am in the world, H&B is active on my mobile and tab 24 hours a day. H&B mobile banking. Bank anywhere from any mobile.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. We now take a closer look at the Business Confidence Index, and with me is Managing Director of Nielsen, Shaheen Khader. So, Shaheen, tell us a little bit about the latest movements in the BCI.
Yeah, I think if you look at a sort of a 12-month trend, Anushan, you see that the BCI has actually gone up from around 125 12 months ago to about 138 in June. So this growth has largely happened as a result of businesses feeling that the next few months short-term business prospects are good. But this has leveled off. This rate of increase of the BCI has leveled off in the last 3 to 4 months, mainly as a result of the optimism being somewhat curtailed.
What do respondents have to say about the economy?
Well, while the economy remains a pressing issue, I mean, spontaneously 50% of respondents say that the economy is the most pressing issue right now. However, optimism has increased in Q2 of this year compared to the previous quarter, Anushan.
What about the investment front? How is Sri Lanka faring on that in the eyes of the respondents?
Actually, investment intent has remained mixed over the last several months. About a third each, are positive and negative, and the balance are sort of undecided. So it's a bit strange that for so long, there is this division of opinion.
According to the poll results, Shaheen, what is the biggest issue facing businesses at this point of time?
I think it's the high cost of goods and services, and also as a result of high import and other value-added taxes. This remains the biggest issue facing business. Because obviously, what happens is the cost to consumers go up, and therefore consumer spending power is reduced.
In terms of projections for the near term, where do you see the BCI heading?
Well, Nielsen has a FMCG retail panel where we monitor FMCG sales in the general trade, and this has shown actually about a 5 to 6% increase in sales over the last on an annualized basis in the first 5 months of the year. But this rate is more or less similar to the inflation rate. So therefore, I don't think the BCI is going to shoot up or shoot down. I would expect it to remain more or less the same at a broad level.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Shaheen Khader. We're going in for a short commercial break now. On the other side, we'll have the latest on the economy with economist and LMD columnist Deshal Dimel. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
As soon as my salary goes into my HNB account, my family goes shopping just like a power play. Now with HNB mobile banking, wherever you are in the world, you can check your account balance and do your banking with ease. Wherever I am in the world, HNB is active on my mobile and tab 24 hours a day. HNB mobile banking. Bank anywhere from any mobile.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. We now take a closer look at the economy, and with me is economist and LMD columnist Deshal Dimel. So Deshal, consumption levels do not seem to be increasing. Now, what are the sensitivities behind this, and what needs to be done to boost it?
Yeah, Anushan, actually in 2013, the consumption component of GDP grew at just 3.5%, and if you compare it with, say, 2011, it was growing at double-digit levels. So there's been a significant drop there. A number of reasons have influenced this. If we look back a couple of years to 2012, where we had, in the early part of 2012, we had a number of different policy changes that resulted in cooling down the economy. And I think some of those impacts are still working their way through. So, for example, the Sri Lankan rupee was allowed to float in February 2012, resulting in a depreciation of close to 20%. At that time, at the same time, there was a reduction in a number of energy subsidies. And also interest rates were increased at that time. So all of those factors contributed to basically eroding the discretionary expenditure of consumers. And I think some of those impacts are still working through. Another important thing is, of course, the fact that pawning, gold-backed lending has declined significantly, which was really an important source of consumption, particularly for the rural population, because a lot of that population doesn't have access to collateral except for some form of gold. So when that aspect of lending declines, it's a really big decline in overall consumption in the economy. So I think those are the real drivers of this decline. In terms of boosting it, well, recently the central bank announced a policy of creating a kind of buffer to enable banks to increase their lending against gold by giving them some kind of security and to enable higher lending. So that might have some impact, though we have to wait and see the extent to which that can increase, particularly on the pawning side. But I think other than that, there's not a great deal that can be done from, say, a policy perspective. I think it's just a question of allowing the impacts of overall economic growth to feed into household income growth as well, because that's another thing that we haven't really seen thus far in a big way. We've seen strong GDP growth at a headline level, but we haven't really seen a concomitant growth at household income level. So until household incomes start to see the benefits of GDP growth, I don't think we're going to see a significant boost in consumption in the short term.
What are the main implications of weak consumption growth and a low investment environment? Now, how would these factors impact government revenues?
Well, of course, a major implication is consumption is the major part of GDP. It accounts for about just under 70% of Sri Lanka's GDP. So low consumption feeds into lower GDP growth in the longer term. So that is certainly one important thing. You mentioned government revenues. That's again a significant area. I think one reason why we have seen government revenues underperform in the last couple of years is possibly a reflection of this lower consumption. If you look at the composition of Sri Lanka's government revenue, approximately 50% of it comes from duties such as VAT and excise duty, all consumption-based, and also imported customs duty. So all of those are very much related to consumption. And if that trend in consumption continues to remain low, we probably will see a negative impact on government revenues as well. Just had a look at the most recent government revenue figures for the first 4 months of the year. Thus far, it doesn't seem to have had a big negative shock. There's been a slight growth compared to 2013, but still it's below budget. So again, we see that underperforming in government revenue, and I'm confident that there's a link between that and the low consumption.
Could you just brief us on the current monetary policy stance and its overall effect on our economy?
Thus far, the central bank hasn't really reduced interest rates further in the last few months. But judging by the recent low inflation that we've seen, particularly in June and also in May, where we've seen record low inflation, also when we look at the low degree of demand for credit, I wouldn't be surprised that in the second half of the year if we see some further reductions in policy interest rates.
How is the rupee faring at this point in time, Dishal?
Rupee has been quite stable for the last few months. In fact, government has actually been, central bank has been buying US dollars to prevent excessive appreciation of the rupee. So I think again that is a reflection of reduced demand for imports and at the same time strong export growth, remittances, tourist earnings and so on. So in general, I think the external sector has been performing quite well and it's reflected in a fairly stable rupee. I'd expect the rupee to remain quite stable in the next few months as well.
Now, Pathfinder just came out with a report on the consequences of ethnic violence in the country on our economy. Now, what, in your opinion, are the repercussions both domestically and internationally?
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question. If we need to look at it in two time frames. If you look at the short-term immediate economic impact, I would say to be largely localized within the area where we had that violence taking place. And to give you a ballpark figure, the government has pledged rupees 200 million for reconstruction. Now that would be going towards the rebuilding of damaged houses and business establishments and so on. But it probably wouldn't capture the amount of lost income through livelihood disruption, business disruption, and so on. So I would say the actual impact in terms of an immediate economic impact will be significantly higher than that 200 million. But if you look at a more dynamic, longer-term view of things, I think one issue to keep in mind is that this kind of incident has been taking place now for the last couple of years, since late 2012 maybe. And this has been possibly the most violent manifestation of it. Now, my concern is if this carries on and if we see a continuation of this kind of impact, we could have negative repercussions on our international relations. One example, of course, is on the UNHRC, where we are at the moment facing an inquiry at the UNHRC level. And actually, one of the clauses that is mentioned there is specifically relates to rights and violence against religious minorities and so on. So this is actually very significant issue in that context. So if we fail to address it, fail to quell any future manifestations of such violence, we could see negative implications on the UNHRC side as well. Probably not in terms of, as I mentioned earlier, not in terms of UN sanctions, but possible bilateral acts later on. And another important aspect to keep in mind is the relationship with the Middle East, and already the Organization of Islamic Countries has already made a statement about this particular incident. And again, I wouldn't think that this is an immediate short-term concern, but if this kind of issue continues, if we see further iterations of this, we could undermine our relationship with some of the Middle Eastern countries. And we all know the importance of that to our economy in terms of remittances, in terms of our tea exports, in terms of our oil imports. They're a very important contributor. And also in terms of tourism. I mean, we know that the Middle East has been a growing tourism market. 2013, there was about a 40% increase in arrivals from the Middle East. And again, that we don't really want to undermine that relationship as well. So there are a number of, I think, broad macroeconomic implications if this kind of violence is allowed to continue. But we should be able to control it and to limit it and prevent this kind of thing happening again. I think we are all familiar with what has happened in the past, and I think it's a good high time we learned our lessons.
That was economist and L&D columnist Dishal Dimel. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.